Hi, welcome to Hammond in Action Now. We have a star-studded cast and panelists tonight. They're awesome. We have Representative Ann Hughes. We have Representative Robyn Porter. We have Sarah Ganong from the Working Families Party, and we have Charles Dew from 1199. So we're going to talk about revenue equity tonight because that is vitally important for the state of Connecticut. The state of Connecticut is not broke, and we need everybody to stop saying that out loud because it's just not true. We'll see you in a few.
Let's go! Ho, ho!
Hey, everybody, how are you? Thank you so much for
Hello.
joining tonight. The Revenue Equity Panel. We're talking money tonight. This is the money talk. If everyone wants to go around and introduce yourselves, go ahead. Representative Porter, we already know you, but because you're family, so, like it or not, you're family.
Yes, I'm loving it. I'm loving it. I more than like it. Representative Robyn Porter, representing the 94th District, Hampden, New Haven, chair of the judiciary. Wow. Oh, Gary, will get me saying that. Chair of Labor and Public Employees, member of the Judiciary and Appropriations Committee, and glad to be with you all tonight.
Thank you, Sarah.
Hey, Rhonda. Thanks for having me. Sarah Ganong. I'm with the Working Families Party. I'm the campaigns director here in Connecticut and thrilled to be here.
Awesome. I'm glad to have you. Representative Hughes, nice to meet you, ma'am.
And nice to meet you. Thank you for welcoming us. I'm Representative Hughes of the 135th District, Easton, Weston, and Reading, and co-chair of the House Democratic Progressive Caucus, also a vice chair of Aging. I'm on Human Services and Labor.
All right now. All right.
Yeah, yeah, baby.
And Charles.
Thanks for having us, Rhonda. I am the policy director at 1199 New England, Healthcare Workers Union, Labor.
Yeah.
Labor.
We family.
Working hard.
Yes.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. So, we were talking about this revenue situation where, I deal in affordable housing and there's a severe shortage of vouchers. Obviously, the housing choice vouchers coming out of HUD are very scarce, and the waiting list for those are very long. And then you have, the state vouchers, the RAP vouchers here in Connecticut are scarce. And in the middle of this crisis we're dealing with this public health crisis, which has now triggered, economic crisis, the likes we haven't seen in, 70 years. So tell me about what are we doing? What are we going to do about it? Besides those 17 billionaires that live here in Connecticut, besides those, let's not even bring them up. What do you think, Mr. Representative Hughes?
Can I take a first stab? I really like to lay the landscape that we have disinvested deliberately through our policy and through our budget. People, basically, our workforce, our people, are most vulnerable, and we've prioritized those actually with the most wealth and businesses and so forth that are not, we're afraid that they're going to leave if we ask them to pay their fair share in terms of an ecosystem that we all benefit from, right? All the services that we are now relying on, like unemployment, that all goes to our unemployment services. All the things we rely on, like public health now, that all goes through our State Department of Public Health. We know we've been on our own because the federal government hasn't helped us in this crisis. So we only have two levels of government services: local, municipal, and state. We have no regional government to speak of besides probate court. So and everybody's like, oh, cut the estate tax. And I say, well, I hope you never have to rely on probate court, because that's what funds our probate court. So as long as you never have anybody die, go through probate court or adoption, we can afford to cut that. So we have to generate revenue from the places that can afford to give more, because the workforce that has borne the brunt of this pandemic has already given what they can and has already sacrificed what they can. So now how are we going to build our way out of this recovery? Well, it's not by cutting the services that we've all come to depend on. 40,000 unemployment claims a week, it was never built for that. So we've had to ramp up our nonprofits, our local supply chain, our grocery store workers, all of that. So I think once people understand that our Connecticut budget, almost two-thirds, or certainly half, are fixed debt liability and fixed costs. We can't change it, and we can't cut our way through that. So we're trying to operate a robust, fully functioning state and service safety net on basically half a budget. And so that's why we need to raise revenue and make a bigger pie, not recut up the pie that's there. We need a bigger pie to get out of this recovery. And that's how I like to lay out the starting point is from disinvestment over the years that was never adequately funded, to how are we going to get out of this pandemic that's still going on, and how are we going to fund an equitable recovery? Well, it takes a lot of investment, and that's why we got to widen the pie.
Sure, I agree 100%. This is not just a regular, the urban communities are asking for money again. It's just not that. It's bigger than that. It's a situation where the whole state is feeling the economic effects of the pandemic, but if the urban ask has always had a problem, it's even worse now. If you're feeling it in the four corners, then definitely the urban communities, Hartford, Bridgeport, New Haven, Waterbury, New London, are really feeling it. So I agree 100%. Norma, I'm sorry, we missed you. I want to just make sure we introduce you to, can you introduce yourself, Norma?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me join. My name is Norma Martinez-Hosang, and I'm coordinating Bargaining for the Common Good campaign, and then our broader campaign, Recovery for All, where we're fighting, it sounds like, for the same things, to make sure that the services that community members across the state have needed for many, many years, even before the pandemic. And so I'm excited to be here, because I think this is a great opportunity over the next few months to try and make some real structural changes that will be long lasting. Thank you for inviting me.
Awesome. I'm sorry, Representative Porter, I cut you off.
Oh, no worries. Glad to see our girl Norma has joined us. And I just want to kind of piggyback off of what Representative Hughes was saying. It's not just a disinvestment in people, it's been a disinvestment in state government. And I think the pandemic has really shined a bright light on it. And a perfect example is what we saw happen with unemployment in this state. We have consistently cut state government workforce, and it left us in a poorly positioned to weather the storm, right? We have seen more unemployment claims in the few months we've been in this pandemic than we've seen in 5 years. That's how much we got in the months that the pandemic has been going on. So there was no way to keep up with that. And then to make it even worse was we had been cutting staff in state agencies, right? Calling ourselves, saving money and building revenue and that kind of thing. So it's like we got to really do better. We can do better, and we should do better. And we really need the people in this state that have not felt the pandemic in a way that the majority of us have, especially the working class people and middle class. They need to step up so that we can, bridge the gaps in education and the health disparities, the give people the ability to have home ownership, which is how you build wealth in this country, and level the playing field. So the recovery for all, this thing that we're championing as a team and as a family, is for everybody, and it's so that everyone in Connecticut gets to have a piece of that pie that Representative Hughes is talking about, making bigger, and we can certainly make it bigger. We have reports of being in a really good stance right now with a surplus, but I mean, let's think about why that is the case. We've actually had people staying home, not spending money, and actually able to save money. And then you open the economy back up, naturally people are going to go out and there's going to be an influx of spending. And it just goes to show that when we're spending money in the state of Connecticut, what the rewards are, when you invest in the state in that way and you spend money in your communities and in your neighborhoods, what a benefit that is. And we're actually getting to see that benefit, which is a benefit we haven't seen in a very long time. And it took a pandemic and shutting down the state for that to happen, because people that weren't usually able to save money, hello, me, actually was able to save some money, and when the economy did open back up, the money got spent, right? So we need to really take a look at that. And I'm very grateful for the partners we have on the panel tonight, Working Families Party, 1199, and the Common Good, really done some great work. And I'll let them speak to what it is that they brought to the table, but we could not be having this conversation without them and their skill set.
That's right. That's right. Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, thanks. We're happy to be here. I mean, I think from the perspective of working families, this has been something that we're talking about for a really long time and working in partnership with a lot of these groups. But really the pandemic, as folks have mentioned, has brought to light, I think, in a new way for a much broader swath of Connecticut and America and the world, the real deep inequities that we're facing, both for economic injustices, racial injustices, right? We saw the Black Lives Matter uprisings this summer. And I think just all of the attention that's being paid to those kinds of things, really now with this budget cycle in Connecticut, this is the time to be kind of putting our money literally where our mouths are. And if we're going to be in the streets chanting Black Lives Matter, if we're going to be talking about the folks that are losing their jobs and wanting to make sure we're taking care of them, let's make sure folks can come back to better jobs. Let's make sure we're not sending kids back to schools that are still as segregated as they were before the pandemic. I think this is a really great chance to be thinking about not just kind of building back and going back to the status quo, because we know there's a lot of folks for whom that wasn't working anyway. So budgets are moral documents, right? I'm nowhere near the first or the last person to say that, but we really want to make sure that this budget in Connecticut is going to be that, and starting with serious revenue is the place to start. There's a lot of folks for whom that wasn't working anyway. So budgets.
Awesome. Charles, from 1199. I can't wait to hear, because I've seemed to become I'm almost feel like I'm a member of the 1199 now. I mean, I'm almost family.
Yeah. You are family. You're family wherever you go, Rhonda.
Yeah, I mean, look, folks have been hitting all the right points tonight, and we really can't go back to the status quo, right? What is the status quo? The status quo is we've cut 15% of our public sector workforce in the last 10 years, right? That means less services. That means we couldn't respond to the pandemic in the way we should have been. Our union represents nursing home workers, home care workers, group home workers. We all know what happened in the nursing homes. Our workers couldn't get the proper PPE. They were wearing trash bags, literally wearing trash bags, trying to protect themselves, risking their lives, right? Risking their lives going to work. Home care workers, they don't have health insurance right now, right? So that's the status quo we're living in. They don't have health insurance. They're not making a living wage. And I liked what Representative Porter said about the public sector too, and the cuts to the public sector and public jobs, right? Because when you cut one of those jobs, you're taking away a service, right? When you cut counselors, when you cut folks working on re-entry programs for people coming out of prison, that has a huge effect on everyone in the state. And it's also been, the public sector employment has also been a driver of the middle class, in particular the Black middle class, all over the country, and Connecticut's no exception. And so when we talk about cutting the public sector, this is a racial justice issue. It needs to be understood that way. And, inequality, revenue, I think these concepts often, they feel kind of abstract, right? But what inequality really means is, it means that while billionaires are making more profits than they ever have during the pandemic, right? Just making money hand over fist, our schools are in terrible condition. We can't properly fund healthcare. We have an affordable housing problem, and we're losing all these public sector jobs. One incredible stat that I read today, actually, that comes from the comptroller of the state, that all the jobs we lost during the Great Recession, we've only made back about 80% of those jobs. This is before the pandemic hit, so things are even worse now. We've only made back 80% of those jobs. And what is that 20% that we're missing? It's all public sector jobs. We made back our private sector employment, but that 20% is all public sector. So what we've done, the status quo, is that the state is saying that the state is actually hamstringing our own recovery, right? By not creating these middle class, solid jobs with healthcare and a pension for folks out there to reach the middle class, and that's a huge problem.
And not just that, I'm sorry.
It's like the middle class has become invisible. It is. I mean, really, the middle class is invisible, and the people, my mother spent 20 years in a nursing home, and she went in there very young, and she spent many, many years in a nursing home in Stanford. And those women were our family. They literally are your family. They're taking care of your family in a very fragile and frail state. And we treat them like they're nothing. We treat them like they're nothing. No PPE, not even trying to get it. The people that, are checking out your groceries, the folks collecting the carts in the parking lot. These are all, they're not invisible people. They're not, but we treat them like they are. It's terrible. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Representative Porter. I can rant all day.
No, you and I both, but I just wanted to piggyback off of what Charles was saying. The 80% of the jobs that we got back in the private sector, the majority of them are minimum wage and low wage jobs. And that's part of the reason why we don't see the revenue that we should be seeing when we're talking about gaining back 80% of the workforce that we lost. If we have 80%, where are the middle class people? These are folks that have lost good paying, sustainable, livable wage jobs as middle class earners. And now they're back in the system, but they're back as minimum wage workers. And we're talking about people with undergrad, advanced degrees, PhDs. We have students saddled with student debt, parents saddled with debt, and no way to pay it back. And I don't know if anybody else has noticed, and I'm being a little facetious when I say that, but we're going to the grocery stores now, and now that the stores are back open, one roll of paper towel is costing you $2, like more than double. I went out and got a 6-pack of Bounty paper towel today for $12.99 on sale. And I used to could get that for under $10. It was about $7.99, $8.99. Now it's like $5, $6 more. And we're having to deal with people that don't think that we need to give people wage increases. We actually have people in the building I'm in, and myself, working, that want to push back on minimum wage. We actually had somebody introduce a bill in labor where they want to, they don't want the index to be in effect. They don't think that as the cost of living goes up, the minimum wage should be adjusted. And I'm like, $15 an hour is not enough to start with, but granted, it's better than $10.10. And when you're that wage earner, it really, $1 extra makes a significant difference when you've been working for 5, 6, 10 years and haven't gotten a raise at all. So every year people are getting a raise until 2023, thanks to the Democrats in this state. where they will be at $15 an hour. So, I mean, we have to take all of these things into consideration when we talk about what it is we need to be doing and what we can afford to do. We cannot afford austerity. We cannot go back talking about an austerity budget and cutting spending. And it confuses me because we're cutting spending in places where we haven't been spending money. That makes no sense to me.
It's ridiculous. I mean, I always wonder. I mean, obviously, I've never been rich. I don't know what that's like. So I don't know what it's like to not have to figure out how, to balance, my little checkbook every month and figure out how I'm going to pay my bills and whatnot. So, I mean, so if I have $1 billion, literally, I mean, like, I'm not gonna be able to spend that in one lifetime. I'm not going to miss it, but they do act like they're going to miss it. And they're not. And I mean, looking at some of these proposals, like, the mansion tax, maybe an income tax restructure, to increase money, adding more taxes to capital gains and dividends. Capital gains and dividends. Come on, people. I mean,
Loopholes.
most people don't even know what that is because we don't have to worry about those issues.
Well, this is the difference between wealth and like salary. So income, we're talking about minimum wage for work, but we're talking about closing these carried interest loopholes and these capital gains, because that's on wealth. And right now that wealth is in a closed circuit, getting bigger and bigger, but not being invested in the very ecosystem where people are profiting and enjoying their wealth, and with the Trump tax cuts, these were catastrophic because that money, that savings of that the Trump tax cuts never got invested back in Connecticut. If we could have taken those tax cuts and invested them in those structural chasms that were growing ever wider before the pandemic, we could have saved lives, literally saved lives, and protected workforce. And right now, I just got off a call with the complex care subcommittee of MAPOC, which oversees the Medicare and I forget what the acronym is, but it's all about the complex care workforce, both home care caregivers and nursing home and congregate care staff. They're fleeing. Why would they stay if they're undercompensated, underprotected, spread too thin, especially in home care where they're going from house to house to house and only getting paid for 1 hour, and you have to, maintain your car and so forth. Like, who, I used to say, who's going to clean your ass when you get old? Like I used to say that back in, like, these are workforce, vital caregivers that can't be outsourced. You can't outsource to China or anywhere else essential caregiving and frontline workers. And so we have deliberately, because they're mostly female and majority Black and brown workforce, exploited that labor. And now we're asking for our wealthiest neighbors to invest in Connecticut's recovery, invest in our workforce, invest in our frontline workforce that have sacrificed the most and given the most in this crisis. And we're asking everyone else to step up like they have.
That's right.
Norma, I know we've already chatted, so I already know how you feel, but tell us how you feel.
Well, I mean, I think the part where I want to contribute, because you all have said such great things, and I agree with all of them, is that we really do have an opportunity right now to unite and speak in one voice. I mean, you all should know, in the public that are watching this, that Representative Porter and Hughes are championing legislation that will hopefully be introduced tomorrow to increase revenue state. And what we have said as a coalition in terms of recovery for all folks that are joining this fight is that, you know, you push in the legislature, like inside the Capitol, and they're doing an incredible job at bringing along other legislators to champion this very, very important piece of legislation that will raise revenue. And we're not talking just, you know, in the next year or 2 years, but that would really make a structural change to have more revenue to fund these critical services. So what we are wanting to do, and what we want to do, is make sure that we put a face to these stories that we're talking about. I know, you know, many of our organizations might looking at issues of housing, healthcare, um, immigrant rights, all kinds of different issues. And we need to unite and speak in one voice when we say our community has been suffering before the pandemic. Things need to change, and they need to change now. And the way that we do it is by raising revenue from the individuals and the corporations that are not hurting, that have gotten away for far too long, not paying their fair share. So I invite you all to connect with Rhonda. She has the information in figuring out how to join, how to sign on to the campaign that we have launched. And you know, you should know that we have great support with representatives and senators who are going to try and make this pass. But it's not gonna work if it's not a lobbying campaign, is what we say. This is not a lobbying campaign. One, because it's, you know, there's no place where we could actually go in person. But two is that it's going to take some kind of disruption. It's going to take actions to really make sure that that the pressure is there to make sure that we pass these proposals that that were mentioned around the estate tax, the raising revenue from the very, very rich. So I ask you to join our fight with us, and I'd be happy to follow up with any organization or individuals who wants more information on that.
I can't wait. I'm gonna definitely I'll share the links to all the information on our page and all of our pages, so we can make sure everybody who needs to get involved. And is it at the point now that we need to start everyone to calling their state rep and their state senator and start saying, look out, this legislation is coming, so you all need to start getting on board now?
Yeah, we're planning to put together some town halls. We're planning to collect some stories, so some video stories. And we know that, you know, it's a few months. The proposal is going to get negotiated over the next few months. So yeah, but getting connected would be great, and connected with you, Rhonda, to us through you would be wonderful.
Well, that'd be great, because we'll spread the word. Sarah, did you have something to say? I'm sorry, did I cut you? No? Okay. I just think that, you know, I've always said this, you know, you can go through the towns in Connecticut and you can see exactly, okay, nobody's going to be happy about what I'm going to say, but as you drive through Route 1 and through the towns of Connecticut and whatnot, you can see where the red lines were. As soon as you drive in and out of a red line community, it's very obvious. These communities who have been for decades disinvested in. And our argument on our page, you probably hear it all the time in all of our pages, we continue to say, everybody was required to pay the same amount of property tax and income tax, but those that were in charge and in the leadership were taking money and using it to invest in other communities, non-Black and brown. So this is where we're left. You know, we're left with communities, and we're still doing it. You know, we're indirectly still doing it. We're still allowing wealthier communities to continue to remain wealthy and insulate their wealth in their communities, and they make their communities insulated. You can't afford to live there. You know, you can't afford, you know, the schools in our communities, you know, and the urban communities continue to suffer with shortages of money and funds. The municipalities are struggling. And it's just not okay. It's just not okay. It's not okay that our schools are suffering. It's not okay that our access to healthcare is suffering. It's not okay that our infrastructure is suffering and our people are suffering. And you can go literally, in Bridgeport is always the weirdest one. I mean, you literally can go 3 miles down the road and be in a poverty situation. And then up the road, you've got like the Brooklawn Country Club area. No offense to the Brooklawn Country Club area folks, but you got to drive by some of these communities to get to the highway, people. So you don't act like you don't see it. And really, I think that they've been protected from having to pay their fair share for decades, for generations, honestly, here in Connecticut. It's unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Hughes, I know you're not done.
Yeah, the way you describe it, you're so right, and I happen to represent one of those economically segregated communities. And the question is that this pandemic has exposed how interconnected we are. When we get sick and go to the hospital with COVID, where are we going? We going to Bridgeport. We're going to St. Vincent's. We don't have a hospital. We don't have any doctors in our town. We don't have any business in our town. We get to have an exclusive, economically gated community with largely self-funded public schools. But when we get sick and when we need help and when we go to the grocery store, we're going right into that towns where we have deliberately walled off, like you said, through generations and policy, the workforce that we've come to depend on, and the workforce that is literally sacrificing themselves for the wider community. We don't get to live within the zip code entirely that we've, that we're born in or grew up in or now call home. We don't get to live there, right? We're all interconnected. And I keep saying, look, Connecticut's not that big. It's 3.5 million people. This is like a large Cleveland. If we want to do this for Connecticut, we can. We're not, we're not California. We're just trying to, break down those barriers and make sure that there's a robust safety net and access to health equity for every child, regardless of status, regardless of color of skin, regardless of zip code in Connecticut. Let's just show how it's done in Connecticut. And yes, will it require, a bold investment to address these egregious disparities? Yes, it will. And if not now, in this convergence of crisis that Biden described yesterday, then when?
Right. If not now, when?
That's right.
I mean, we look at it every day. I've been in affordable housing since 1993. And the waiting lists of these apartment communities are decades long. I mean, if you know anybody who work at housing authorities, I now work for CHFA, and in our housing authorities that I manage around the state, as an asset manager, there's, the waiting lists are closed for years. I mean, the New Haven Housing Authority waiting list has been closed for years. I mean, they open it maybe once 8 or 9 years because there's just no funds. And it's all intertwined. I mean, you have the, racism and white supremacy it's built into everything we do and everything we are. And it starts, at birth. If your birth mother, who gives birth to you doesn't have proper access to healthcare, then the delivery is tricky. And then we know about the segregation and the racism that's even built into healthcare. So, you don't get the proper care, even if you do have access when you get to the hospital. I mean, right now, I'm on a group with the state disabilities groups and the New Haven legal aid to fight hospitals who were rationing care during this COVID crisis based on race and pre-existing conditions. So they were not giving out the life-saving monoclonal antibody cocktail to a person like me. They say, you're middle-aged, you got these pre-existing conditions, we're just going to make you comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's literally growing around our state death panels at hospitals
Yes.
right now in the last 10 months, and we caught them.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to have a big press conference on this because there's still several hospitals, including Yale,
Mm-hmm.
that are not telling their patients and the families the truth. I mean, the racism in the healthcare. Then when you do go to college and you get into these enormous amounts of debt, because we're not a wealth-based, we're not an asset-based culture, the Black and brown community, because of what we've been denied for generations to own the
Yeah.
land and own and have the wealth. So I didn't inherit property from my father when he passed away, because he didn't have any property, he didn't inherit any. All right, so
You weren't
I don't
able to
have
take a
any
second mortgage, right? To
I
pay
don't
for
have
your
any
kids'
wealth to
college.
fall back. I didn't get to
Yeah.
sell any assets or stocks or bonds or, cash in my dividends. Sorry. You see what I'm saying? So I mean, it's like it's
Mm-hmm.
just a staircase. It's a stair steps, and it's like you can't get good health care because that's being rationed based on race. You can't get the good job because as soon as you get all the items on the checked, all the boxes checked, they add a box. Sorry, you forgot there's a new box down here and you didn't check that one. So you can't you're not qualified. Or suddenly you're overqualified. Listen, y'all been exploiting us for 200 years. You can exploit me a little bit more if I'm overqualified. I'm fine. And now we get to this crisis, like Representative Hughes just said. Now we have this intersection of a crisis where now we have a public health crisis and everybody's locking down their wealth. Well, you can't you have to unlock those vaults. It's got to stop. And I think it's the only way to do it is to legislate it, because these wealthy folks are not giving money to nonprofits. They're doing the best they can, but they're not giving. I mean, the foundations are giving what they're giving.
Yeah. No,
I mean, I can be cranky all day. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, no, that's all totally right. And, I think the way you've been laying it out too, really connecting the dots. Like, I think that for too long, people have been able to talk about, they've been able to say that they're, for racial justice, for gender justice, without really talking about these issues of inequality and economic justice that are so core to that and so core to everything that you just said. In our union, this past couple of weeks, we've been reflecting about Martin Luther King, right? It was MLK Day, and how Dr. King, near the end of his life, was really super focused on these economic issues of inequality, poverty, jobs. He died visiting Memphis, right, supporting striking workers. And I think there's a lot of politicians, right, who will talk about inequality, racial justice, but when it comes to actually making the kinds of investments, and what do you need to make those investments? Well, you need to raise taxes on people who can not just afford to pay them. It's like nothing to them.
It's not nothing.
They're not going to leave the state. They're coming into our state right now. They came into our state in huge numbers during the pandemic because Connecticut, there's a lot of green space. There's a lot to offer for wealthy people, right? They're not leaving if they're asked to pay just a little bit more to ensure that we live in a real society, right? We're in one society, not two separate societies.
Right. I read a census report a couple of years ago, and I shared it with everybody. It was just everybody was floored. It was a census report that shows how far behind the Black and brown community is in wealth than their white counterpart. And it lined it all up, in jobs, the same job, the same applicant, the same education, the same everything. And they were, just systemically constantly being offered 20 to 25% less than their 25% than their white counterpart. I mean, and so, you have all of these little, pieces of the puzzle that you keep putting it together, and it all boils down to, folks that are ending up in a tent in the middle of a pandemic because they had nothing to fall back on. People who are standing out in a line in the middle of winter to get a box of food so they can feed their family at Christmas. Folks that have tried their best to keep everything afloat, the families that are have true food insecurity. I mean, people, when you talk to folks who are wealthy, they just don't want to believe that there are hungry people in this state. They don't want to believe it. I mean, I talk to people, that's just media hype. I'm like, that's not heat media hype. These people, there are literally people right now trying to figure out how they're going to have enough food to get to the weekend.
Yeah, and Rhonda, what you're describing is deliberate structural racism where it's kept invisible, right? And the myth and the lie, like you said, we have to start talking about what we're passing around as myth, which is there's no real hungry people, and what's the truth. And part of the myth is that if anybody's hungry or anybody's poor, and we never say that word, like we don't ever talk about the poor, it's their individual failure. This is the myth of structural racism and poverty, structural poverty, is that somehow in America, and only in America, we just kind of take that on as an individual moral failing, which is why this budget has to be a moral document, because to address it, we have to address it structurally and collectively, because it's a deliberate policy violence that we have been complicit in for generations, to allow there to be hungry people in our state, caused by crisis or chronic or even homelessness, is a policy choice. And we're inviting the public to put pressure on all of our colleagues in the legislature and this governor to say, we are not choosing this anymore, no more,
Right.
and I can't believe it's taken this pandemic and this attack on our democracy to decide to make a different choice.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't until everybody saw those lines of people trying to get into those food banks. That's what, I mean, maybe that's what they needed to see. Maybe they needed to see people literally lined up, to in long lines. We have them right here, all the way down Difficult Avenue, trying to get to the middle school to get in to get food. And we still don't have any movement, because again, I'm so happy you said that, Representative Hughes. Everybody wants to say, you could have worked harder. What did you do to bring this situation onto yourself? You must have done something, because I worked so hard. I worked hard for what I have. I mean, if I have to hear another person tell me how hard they worked, and if you could just work harder, you'd be all right. I mean, it's just absurd. If we could work our way out of racism, I would already be out of it. Representative Porter would be out of it.
Yeah.
All of it. Norma, we'd be out of it now.
Yeah,
Okay?
I mean, I think what I'd like to add to that is like the same way that there's this kind of like blaming an individual. On the other hand, we have like the wealth that has been passed down by generations, that it isn't anybody working hard. I mean, and I think that that's the truth. So this myth of austerity, that many people believe, and sometimes even we do too. We kind of think, oh yeah, where are we going to get the money? When we forget that even here in Connecticut, 15 years ago, it was better in terms of the ratio of what the rich used to pay to what folks like us used to pay was different. And I think maybe Charles could talk a little bit more about this, about how even what we're asking for now is not even going back to where things were some years ago. So this myth of austerity, that we have to hunker down, that there is not enough money, it's the same, it's the other side of the coin. Like, that is not true. There is enough money here in Connecticut, and we have a solution. We have a way to make sure that money is raised to fund these critical problems, because at the end of the day, when we're talking about like the services that we want funded, we're talking about colleges, right? Community colleges, public higher education. So we're not talking about Yale, a private school that has a lot of money. We're talking about these community colleges where our kids and many of us went through, and that was a path to having a career. That's what we're talking about funding. These pathways to get our children some educated in a way that they're not going to be in debt for the rest of their life because they can't afford colleges. I mean, that's what we're talking about. So this myth of austerity, it's a myth, it's a lie. The money is there, and we want it. We're going to go after it, and we're going to fight really, really hard to make sure that something changes during this legislative session. And we're gonna, we're gonna continue that fight even after this legislative session. So we need to like put that out there, those messages out there, that it's the same way that we're not poor because we want to be poor. It's not true that you're wealthy because you worked really hard and you need to pay your fair share.
The hardworking, wealthy people, Lord help me. I've been listening to that for 40 years.
And
Tired of
Rhonda, let me tell you, you want to talk about the wealthy not working hard. We have a fine example of that. Charles talked about it a little earlier. I mean, like, they have in the months of this pandemic doubled their dividends, while the people that have made it possible for them, the people that are really working the hardest, have died. Their family members have died. They have been laid off. They have lost their jobs. They have lost their health care. And those that are still able to go to work are having to choose between going to work or staying home to take care of themselves or their family members or their children. They're the ones that are pushing for these schools to be open because they have to go to work. And they're working 2 and 3 jobs. So when we talk about pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and if you just work a little harder, how do you work your way out of poverty, especially when we live in a society where poverty has been criminalized? Childhood behavior has been criminalized. And the crime in it all is that rich people are getting richer on the backs of those who have given everything they have to give, including their lives. So I think this is a reckoning for us where we are right now in this country. And this is going to speak to the conscience of this country and what we are going to be defined as going forward. Because this is a centuries old problem. The pandemic has just highlighted it for us, right? It has brought it to the forefront, and it has slapped us in the face. And now the question is, what are we going to do in response to that? And who are we going to hold accountable for that? Because we all have some accountability in this, all of us. And I think it's time for everybody to stand up and to stand together and do what's right. How do you double your not even your income, but double your wealth,
your
right?
wealth.
While the majority of the people in this state are still trying to make ends meet. Some people don't even know where their next meal is coming from. We didn't have to look to Texas or anywhere else to see what was going on with people and how they're hungry. We've all been out there with these food drives. We've all been out there giving out food boxes and giving out money out of our pockets, giving out of our own lack. And these are the things that we need to really talk about and hold people accountable. And it is holding the legislators and the governor and all of us accountable and holding our feet to the fire, because it's been said earlier, if we don't do it now, when are we going to do it?
Yeah.
I mean, this is the plantation, and it has been made very clear when we talk about redlining, they created these ghettos. And they created conditions that were conducive to poverty, right? And they created a criminality that can't be cured unless they decide to get up off of some of their riches. And what's really disgusting is right now we're talking about raising the gas tax. And guess what? Who is that going to hurt? Working class, working poor, and middle class. These millionaires and billionaires, those are pennies. Raise the gas tax. What do they care? There's no equity in that. And when we say recovery for all, we are pushing for equity. We want fair taxation. We want fair everything. And we want you to come back into these districts, back into these communities that you have redlined, and we want you to put the resources back where they belong. We want the opportunity back where they belong. We don't want no more substandard education. We don't want no more substandard wages, no more substandard health care, none of that. Give us what we deserve. Give us what we've earned. We're not asking for these things. We deserve them. They're our right. And it's robbery. It's robbery and it's criminal. And it's time that people be held accountable. And I've been watching Trump yesterday, and the thing he bragged about was, yeah, I may be gone, but look what I delivered. Look at what the court looks like now. Look at this, look at that. And he showed us how it's done. We have a majority in the House, we have a majority in the Senate, we have a Democratic governor, we got Biden, we got Harris, we got the Senate, Georgia delivered. We have no more excuses. It's time to get this
No more
shit done.
excuses.
Time to get it
There's no more
done.
excuses.
No.
I 100% agree.
My grandmother used to say, excuse my French, shit or get off the pot. That's what it's time to do. Because people are dying. They're past hurting. They are dying. And they are putting not only themselves in harm's way, going out here to service us, grocery store clerks, truck drivers, the healthcare workers, the folks stocking the shelves so that we can go get paper towel and tissue. And for the wealthy folks in the state, filet mignon and whatever else y'all eating. It's
But
just not fair.
We have our nerve, don't we, though, walking around
Not
here in
fair.
state Connecticut masquerading as a blue state.
More like
As
purple.
a state, like a state that's so progressive and blue. We are clearly a voter suppressive state. We have such a wealth gap here in the state of Connecticut. It's not even funny. We're the most segregated and red line state. And like I said, you could drive in and out of these communities. It's very easy. You could drive and you can be like, okay, this must be, and the argument is always, oh, that's their community. And, this is what everybody says here in Hamden about Newhallville. That's how they just choose to live like that. I said, no, they didn't. I said, let's ask about, and see the one thing that, second, the redlining, if we talk about the redlining, which I like to talk about a lot because that's kind of the business I've been in, and what they did in the 1930s. The 1930s said that whiteness is valuable because whiteness and white folks that live in these communities are of value. These are the communities of value. And we always see it in gentrified and gentrification that happens all over the country. We still see it. We look at Harlem, gentrified.
Look at Newhallville.
look at South Norwalk. I grew up in Norwalk, Connecticut, over there right by the hospital. South Norwalk back in the 1970s. And actually, my parents used to say back in the 1950s and 60s and the 40s, South Norwalk was nice. And then took its little dip. Look at it now. I can't afford a doorknob in South Norwalk right now. Gentrified. Why? Because the color of the people that now live there has made that community valuable. And it's really unacceptable. We have to talk about, the true foundation for how we arrived. The wealth is in the land. I continue to tell folks, I said, we have, our agency has all these great first-time home buyer programs. Please get in there and buy something, even if it's a condo, something. Because I said that is like every time you make your payment for your housing, it's like a little piggy bank. It's a piggy bank. So when you leave your apartment, all you get is your security back, maybe. But if you leave your house, you get your equity. And you could take the equity and give it to a family member and will it to someone. This is what I'm trying to say. Please build your equity or wealth. It's in the land. It's in a job, sort of, because the job gives you the money to pay for the land. But when the federal government they made a decision in the 1930s that the land that you live on is not valuable because you're there. Literally that was the beginning of the end of really being able to grow wealth in the Black and brown community because they decided they weren't going to invest in it. So federal government, you guys created this mess with your mortgage insurance BS that you did in the 1930s. You guys need to figure out how to give us our damn money back. And I don't want to hear about an ask. We're not asking for it. We're demanding the money back. You underinvested, you deliberately, with intentionality, underinvested in communities of color for 70, 80 years. You deliberately did it. You made these towns have racist deeds. Spring Glen, right here in Hamden, I put one of the deed language up on my page and everybody went nuts. Sure did. And they even have nice little task force, beautiful ladies now working to end the segregation of housing in Hamden, because everybody needed to see it. The language on the deed says plain and simple, no one can live in this property unless they're, a white person. So I mean, the separation in the wealth, folks in Greenwich, Westport, Fairfield, wherever you billionaires live, you guys didn't get there by accident.
Right.
You got there with intentionality. And with intentionality, you must morally give back to the communities that you took from with the value in your white skin. That's it. And there's no more being apologetic about it. That's it. And nobody wants to hear this. Everybody gets all, they need Maalox. They start drinking out the Maalox bottle. When I say it is a fact.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all knew what you were doing when you were doing it. You knew what you were getting when you were getting it.
And here's the fun thing about white supremacy. There are those who, that look like me that benefit from that deliberate policy violence and continuation, and that continue to benefit from basically criminalizing race and poverty in this country. But I like what you said about Connecticut, because there's a veneer in Connecticut that where, I don't know, above that or some of that overt white supremacy is kind of hidden until you uncover it in the deeds, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's based on very deliberately ownership, right? This concept of ownership. So you're talking about owning land, but and all the systems that construct around it, the access to capital and banking and, quite frankly, policing to defend and protect white people and white property. That's it. White people and white property. That's what the systems are designed to. And guess what? They do it very well. Still.
Yeah.
They do it very well. Still. And who benefits from that? And I hear what you're saying. You're saying, look, white people, now you have a responsibility to fix this mess and dismantle those systems, because they're never really quite going to reform, because they were built and designed to protect white people and property, and they're doing that. So now we're saying, okay, how do we design systems to work for everybody? And I don't know, because it's working for that. I don't know how to do it without the kind of dismantling it. And that's what this budget is really doing a little bit more of a deep dive, is dismantling a system that has been normalized. And the other thing I wanted to say is that we've normalized this catastrophic pandemic. One of the things that struck me about Biden and Harris having that reflection of all the lives lost, 400 candles around the memorial, which stands for 400,000 people, that we have not collectively as a country even acknowledged or mourned the enormity of the loss. So that's all compounded. So now we're all just like, why are you taxing me before, like being a wealthy person? Nobody is attacking you. We are trying to address and face the enormity of loss, of suffering, of violence, and do it collectively, because the individuality of our able to survive COVID or to find ourselves in a food line or whatever, that is a freaking myth that it's an individual shame. It is a collective shame that we've allowed to become this crisis.
It's really for a blue state. We're supposed to be so liberal and progressive here. I know that's come on, stop it. It's just ridiculous, and it's just I will make it my life's work. I will continue to make it my life's work to call it out. All of these things all work together: the education, the ownership of the land, and the access to jobs and being able to be protected when you go to work and being paid the same wage for the same work as your white counterpart. All these excuses and all this foolery with people, deliberately paying people less because you can.
Paying women less.
Paying women,
Mm-hmm.
Black folks, immigrants, taking advantage of people with language barriers. It's just, it's
Disabilities.
enough.
Yeah.
Disabilities. I mean, it's just, you cannot. Well, listen, we're done. We're done with the niceties. The niceties are over. So everybody, they're going to be feeling some type of way, I guess. But because I'm just like, okay, so where's the money?
We
And it's
coming
like,
for
oh,
our check.
it's not a money situation, Rhonda. We really, no, it's money. That's what it is. It's money. We need it. We need it now. We need it back. We need it immediately.
That's why we need this recovery for all, because it's going to reduce the income inequality that impedes the economic growth. It's going to help to level the playing field. It's going to produce a fair tax code that will raise $3 billion in revenue, $3 billion that can be spent where we know it needs to go, in education, in healthcare, workforce development. You're talking about pulling up our bootstraps. Well, guess what? You got to give them back to us before we can pull them up.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's 8 o'clock, ladies and gentlemen. I have really enjoyed this talk today. I hope we can keep talking and get more even deeper into these talks as we get through, as the negotiations start with the language and the bill. I mean, I hope that, just bring me somebody. Let me go tell them. I'll be happy to go tell them. Just give them to me. I don't care who they
We
are.
will.
Well, they're gonna be
Governor
afraid.
Lamont. Listen, I invited Governor Lamont to come to my little thing here. He's like, they don't return my emails either. There's a couple people don't talk. I'm like, why? I'm gonna just be nice. I'm not gonna be mean. They don't want to talk to me.
So good to have you on our side, Representative Hughes and Porter and
Yes.
Rhonda. We're gonna continue to fight and just keep up the good work, and we're gonna support you in the Capitol, Representative Hughes and Porter, to make sure that you have the cover from organizations and the people that have the stories to put a face in all this and all this misery that we've seen over the last year and beyond.
Sarah and Charles.
Dream work.
And Sarah and Charles, any final words?
Yeah, I'll just leave us with the reminder that more people agree with us than disagree with us, and we need to just make sure our voices and our actions are the louder ones. We spent a long time kind of talking about all the ills, and the hope I feel is from knowing that we can come together and we can tackle this and we can deal with these problems.
That's right, Sarah.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think now is the time to really be courageous. And if this stuff were easy, it would have already happened, right? But we have an opportunity. We have to take this opportunity. And, it's just great to be with folks like you all, real champions for justice, Representative Porter, Representative Hughes. I mean, huge honor to be working with you all on this campaign.
Well, thank you all so much. For y'all coming on tonight. This is so cool. And again, I hope we can talk more. And we're in full support of, I had a call with the ladies, the Springland Task Force on ending segregated housing here in Springland and in Connecticut, obviously. And we were all talking about reparations. I'm like, I don't even know how, I don't even know what that looks like, but it's not, it's not business as usual. You have to give back. And it's money. It's money.
Yeah,
eliminate $3 billion.
Let's start there.
Payment. $3 billion is a cheap down payment.
It's a cheap down payment. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, everybody. And I appreciate all your support. And we're going to rock this thing this year. They can forget it. All right. Yeah. Take care and have a great night.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Bye. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks.